He was the wise old frog with a lightsaber and a grammar problem. The guy who showed up in Empire Strikes Back, swung a stick around, lifted an X-wing, and immediately locked in his legacy as the ultimate Jedi philosopher. But here's the thing, what if the Jedi's most iconic leader wasn't actually that wise? What if he was just really good at sounding smart while doing absolutely nothing helpful for 2 entire trilogies? Yoda sat through the rise of the Empire, watched Anakin spiral into darkness, sensed the Sith literally reawakening in the Force, and still just kind of blinked slowly and said things like, "Hard to see, the dark side is." Yeah, thanks buddy, very helpful. While Palpatine is over there giggling in the corner and naming himself Emperor. Honestly, if we judged him like any real-world leader, we'd be talking about how badly he botched the entire war effort. And let's not pretend he didn't have power. This wasn't some ceremonial figurehead. Yoda was the Jedi Grandmaster, top of the food chain, head of the council. And what did he do with that power? Rejected Anakin, ignored warnings, let the Jedi become military pawns, and then dipped to a swamp after it all exploded. That's not a wise retreat. That's just a 900-year-old man ghosting his responsibilities. I mean, imagine you're in a burning building, and the firefighter just shrugs and says, "Unclear, the flames are." You'd be screaming. That's what the galaxy was doing, while Yoda meditated. He wasn't some flawless sage. He was a relic of a broken system. And it's time we stop treating him like a flawless marble statue and start recognizing the cracks. But here's the twist. It's not about hating Yoda. It's about finally questioning the guy we were all told to blindly trust. Because Star Wars is full of heroes who learn from failure. And maybe Yoda's real legacy isn't his wisdom, but the mistakes he finally admitted when it was too late to fix them. In this video, we're breaking down why Yoda might be the most overrated Grandmaster in Star Wars history. From his rigid philosophy to his eerie ability to ignore red flags bigger than a Death Star. We're diving into the myths, the failures, and the moments that proved the little green guy wasn't always the mentor we needed. When people think of the Jedi Order, they picture robed monks swinging lightsabers and spouting wisdom like fortune cookies with midi-chlorian seasoning. And standing above them all, there's Yoda. This little green enigma, perched on his hover chair, eyes half shut, voice cryptic, and reputation untouchable. But what if we've been seeing him all wrong this entire time? What if the Grand Master of the Jedi Order wasn't the galaxy's spiritual guide, but its greatest blind spot? Think about it. Yoda lived for 900 years. 900. That's nearly a millennium of supposed wisdom. And yet, when the Republic started rotting from the inside, the guy just sat there, meditating on how strange the Force felt lately. Palpatine played the Senate like a fiddle, installed himself as Supreme Chancellor, built a clone army in secret, and not once did Yoda raise a suspicious little eyebrow. That's not a wise leader. That's a glorified paperweight with a lightsaber. Why didn't he question the clone army more aggressively? Why didn't he sense the darkness creeping into Anakin's heart before it was too late? And why was every single Jedi under his leadership so shockingly unaware of the biggest Sith conspiracy in galactic history? It's like the entire Order was flying blind, while trusting the guy with the longest resume and the smallest height requirement. Was it respect that kept Yoda in power, or was it just fear of challenging the legend? Because no one ever really asked if Yoda's teachings made sense anymore. They just nodded. While he rambled about attachment being bad and feelings being worse. Meanwhile, the galaxy was setting itself on fire. Maybe it's time we look past the myth. Maybe it's time to ask the uncomfortable question. What if Yoda's greatest legacy wasn't his wisdom, but his failure to recognize his own flaws? You want to scream watching some of Yoda's decisions in hindsight. Like, seriously. How does a guy with access to the entire Jedi archives, thousands of Force-sensitive warriors and literal psychic powers, still miss the fact that the Sith Lord is sitting in the Senate building across the street? It's not just a blind spot. It's a black hole of leadership. Let's talk about the Jedi Code for a second. No attachments. No emotion. Peace over passion. Great on paper. Terrible when dealing with real people. Yoda enforced this code like it was sacred scripture. And what did it get him? Anakinskywalker. A kid literally groomed by Palpatine, spiraling into darkness while Yoda gave vague lectures about fear and destiny like some space TED talker. When Ahsoka walked away from the Jedi Order, Yoda didn't fight for her. He didn't even admit they were wrong. That was one of the Order's brightest students, falsely accused and betrayed, and Yoda just sighed and watched her leave. That's not serenity. That's apathy, wrapped in robes and tradition. There's a quiet kind of sadness when you realize what the Jedi Order used to be and how much of that was lost under Yoda's leadership. Not all at once, but slowly, like a temple crumbling one stone at a time until all that's left is rubble and regret. Yoda wasn't evil. He wasn't corrupt. He was just so convinced of his own wisdom that he forgot how to question it. And that blindness cost the Jedi everything. Their temple, their legacy, their lives, thousands of Jedi erased in a heartbeat, not just by clones, but by the very system they were sworn to protect. When Order 66 was executed, Yoda felt it. He physically felt the death of the Jedi through the Force. That moment on Kashyyyk, when he drops his cane and clutches his chest, it's haunting, because he knew, deep down he knew this was the end and he couldn't stop it. What's worse is what came after. He goes into exile, not to fight, not to rebuild, but to hide, to wait for someone else to fix the mess he couldn't prevent. That's tragic, because this wasn't just the fall of a warrior, it was the collapse of a spiritual leader who realized too late that he'd been wrong about almost everything. It's the kind of sadness that doesn't come from betrayal or war. It comes from watching someone fall under the weight of their own legend, and realizing they were never strong enough to carry it. But here's the thing. Even with all of that, there's still something undeniably powerful about Yoda, because you watch him, in moments like his duel with Dooku or that final face-off with Sidious, and you can't help but feel the sheer weight of presence this little green guy commands. Yoda doesn't need a flashy entrance or booming speeches. He walks in, and the room shifts. Every Jedi respects him. Every clone listens when he speaks. Even the Sith hesitate, because Yoda's name carries centuries of reverence and fear, and for good reason. The duel in the Senate chamber is the one time Yoda truly unleashes everything, not just power, but clarity. He sees the truth, realizes that the Republic is lost and that Sidious has already won. That fight is less about victory and more about understanding the size of the machine he failed to dismantle. And despite losing that battle, Yoda walks away. Not out of cowardice, but because he finally knows what he's fighting. Not a man, but an idea. An empire built on manipulation and complacency. And maybe he knows that killing Sidious wouldn't be enough to stop it. There's awe in watching someone realize their own failure and still choose to carry on. Not as a hero, but as a guardian of whatever light remains. Yoda's greatest redemption didn't come from the Clone Wars or the Jedi Council. It came from Luke Skywalker, the one Jedi who wasn't trained in a temple, but in exile. Away from the rules, away from the dogma, away from the chains Yoda once helped forge. When Yoda trains Luke, he finally softens. Not entirely, but enough to admit that failure is a teacher, not a death sentence. That lesson hits hardest in The Last Jedi, when his ghost tells Luke, the greatest teacher, failure is. That's not just wisdom, that's growth. He realized far too late that clinging to tradition was the very thing that doomed them. And in teaching Luke, he passed on something better. Not rules, but resilience. Not dogma, but adaptability. That's what kept the Jedi spark alive. Luke became the Jedi Yoda couldn't be, because he had the freedom to love, to care, to make mistakes and still get back up. That's something Yoda never allowed in the Old Order, but something he finally embraced in death. So maybe Yoda's final legacy isn't the Grandmaster of the Jedi, but the ghost who nudged the galaxy back toward balance, one mistake at a time. The tragedy of Yoda isn't that he was a villain, or even a failure. It's that he was exactly what the Jedi needed him to be for far too long, until the galaxy changed, and he didn't. He became the embodiment of the Order's strengths and its weaknesses. He was calm when fire was needed, detached when empathy was required, certain when doubt would have saved lives. In trying to preserve the Jedi, he became the very reason they couldn't evolve. But here's the resolution. We don't have to tear Yoda down to see the cracks. We can still respect the legend while learning from the mistakes. Because if Star Wars is about anything, it's about redemption, about passing on what we've learned, even when what we've learned is where we went wrong. Yoda's story is a cautionary tale, not just about leadership, but about listening, changing, adapting. It's not a warning about the dark side, it's a warning about letting the light become so blinding that you can't see the darkness creeping in. And maybe, just maybe, if we stop worshipping the Grandmaster and start understanding the man, we'll finally stop repeating the mistakes that destroyed the Jedi in the first place.